I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, January 16th, 2018 to order with roll call, please.
Betts.
Here.
Kostler.
Here.
Gavelli.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here.
Weinhammer.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll now move to the public comment section. Is there anybody here who would like to address the committee of the whole? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comments. We'll now enter into a public hearing to consider the approval of a conditional use and variance for an electronic message center wall sign for Cambridge Exteriors located at 20 North First Street. Besides the petitioner's representative, do we have anybody here that has any interest in it? Any opposition or concerns or questions regarding that? Because if there is not, there's really no need to go through the formal hearing, but we can go right through right to the matter at hand. So is there anybody here that has any concerns or questions about this? Okay. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. The request before the committee this evening is a request for an additional wall sign on the Cambridge Exteriors building. They're seeking approval this evening of a conditional use and related variance to install electronic message center on the southern facade of their building. This slide shows both the existing and proposed conditions. Proposal is to install a 36 square foot electronic message center sign, which would be on the south side facing towards Route 14. The sign requires both conditional use approval as it is an electronic message center sign, and also a variance for basically it's the second wall sign in that facade, and then also would exceed the 40% requirement for an electronic message or portion of a sign that's used for electronic messaging. Existing conditions, looking at the property, there's two images shown here. The one on the left-hand side of the slide shows the view of the property looking more from the south towards the Route 14 closest cross street. As you can see, there are two existing signs which are on the building now, one that faces towards First Street and the second one which faces towards Route 14. The second image on the lower right-hand side is looking at the building from the intersection of Park Avenue and First Street, where you can see one of those signs from that intersection. The proposed sign would be installed on the south facade, kind of adjacent to the second wall sign, which is installed in that facade. It would not be visible from the intersection. It would only be visible towards the south of the building, towards the Route 14 frontage. In total, the property is permitted by code to have up to 3 signs. It would be permitted 2 wall signs, one facing each street, and also would be permitted to have a monument sign on the property. The proposal would, although it's increased the number of wall signs that's permitted by code, there is no existing monument sign on the property, so it would be in compliance with the total number of signs that are allowed for the zoning district. Within the sign ordinance, there are various standards that must be reviewed or established to consider a conditional use, which are summarized in the slide. Generally, that the use will not be detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, not impede normal orderly development and improvement of surrounding properties, and will comply with other requirements of the sign ordinance. Similarly, for variances, there are standards that are established within the code, summarized in the slide again, that the relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality. The relief proposed is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations and other conditions as shown in the slide. Based off staff's review, with the sign being installed on the south facade, will be placed in a location that will have minimal impacts to surrounding property owners. There are residences that are just to the north of the site, which will the sign will not be visible to those properties from its placement standpoint. Primarily would be visible to any traffic that's on Route 14 or traveling northbound on First Street. In addition, with the conditions that staff is proposing, If supported by the Committee of the Whole and Village Board, staff would recommend that the sign be installed in the south, or condition be the sign that would be installed in the south facade, and that would limit in lieu of installing a monument sign on the property, and then thereby limiting the property for a total of 3 signs, which are currently permitted on the property. Also would recommend that the sign be equipped with an automatic dimming mechanism, so when natural light levels at the nighttime hour decrease, that the sign would also decrease in brightness to reduce its illumination in the area. Also, the sign would not be able to display any videos, blinking, or scrolling script, which is similar to other signs that we have in requirements for the village. And then also the messages that are displayed in the sign can change no less than every 2 minutes. These conditions are similar to conditions which were for a similar sign, which is in the downtown area at the H.R. Stewart property, which received similar conditional use and variances back in 2013. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, but the petitioners also here may be able to provide additional information on the request as well.
Any questions for Brian? Or for the petitioner's representative? Okay, well, that's pretty quick, pretty easy.
Good.
I need to look for a consensus as moving this forward. So, Trustee Costler?
Yes.
Actually,
Yes.
it would be a vote,
Well, that's what committee.
but it's
We
a
can vote in?
recommendation.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
You're just making a recommendation.
So can you do a roll call for a vote for a recommendation?
Well, I think
Just the
we're
voice?
we're just looking to see if we want to
There's
bring this
consensus
forward.
to put it on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Okay, yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Put it-
It's fine for me to be in the,
I have no issues.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. No issues. We'll be on the next village board agenda.
We'll put it on the consent agenda unless there's any opposition to that. Thank you.
Good.
Now, a discussion on special event application.
Mayor, Village Board, before you here is an agenda item related to a special event application. Discussion here kind of in 2 parts. The first part of the discussion is related to the special event application. Currently, we don't have a formal application for hosting special events in the village. This is a more formal process here to make it a little bit easier for staff to identify any needs, understand exactly what's going to occur with the event. Attached to the agenda item is that special event application, looking for any feedback that you have on that. The second part here of the discussion then, as it relates to special events and the special event application, and we talked about it a little bit here previously at some of our meetings, was the costs that the village incurs to assist with some of these special events. There is, in some cases, pretty significant overtime that the village incurs related to special events. Attached to the agenda item is a list, and we've tried to piece out all of these special events that occurred during 2017 to give you an idea of the events that we coordinate on and how much time that costs in terms of police overtime and then also with our public works overtime. Additionally, there's an attachment here related to this special event list that shows those costs, the cost for police personnel overtime, the cost for public works related overtime too. And so I'd like to get the village board's feedback. Tonight, I recommend that this is an initial discussion. This is a first reading of this. We come back at a future committee item, but I want to hear from the village board on if you are interested in pursuing and gathering costs related to police or public works overtime for these special events. If you are, at what level or what cost is that? There's a full freight amount included in the attachment, though. I've listed a special rate if we want to consider a reduced rate for community groups. So looking for your feedback on this to kind of guide how we move this forward.
I just have a question regarding Exhibit C Am I reading it correct that there's only 2 entities currently that reimburse for the services, the Hill Striders Running Club and Prairie
Correct,
Grove High School, the playoff football games?
correct.
Jake, I had a question on that. Was it, because it says playoff games, is it all the football games or just the playoff games?
Chief, can you respond to that?
They requested, I believe, that we do receive reimbursement for, I'd have to check, but I believe we receive it for playoff football games. I don't think that we get reimbursed for the parade that they have for homecoming.
What about all the other
What about all
games
the
throughout the
games?
year?
All the other games, they do reimburse us for that.
Okay.
But there's a contractual provision that says that the school resource officer has to work those games as well as somebody else.
Okay. So I guess what I would like to see is I would like to see that we're treating entities equally, and that I think we should charge for these services of Public Works and the Police Department. I like the form. I think the form is really helpful. That's good. I like that. But I'm looking at the cost differences between personnel, so I think we need to take that into consideration. You also need to take in consideration the equipment we're providing and using, the wear and tear it puts on the equipment, the vehicles, insurance. Could have a workman's comp issue if somebody gets hurt. So I do think all that needs to get taken into consideration when we develop a rate schedule.
I agree with Kim. I think the application is pretty good. I'm a little bit, it seems maybe to trip an applicant up a little bit, like when you ask for a liquor license and they're applying for an event, but they don't have approval for the license yet. So it seems like it maybe is a little bit, I don't know how you work around that if you're asking for the license when they haven't even been approved for the event. So just seems to be, I don't know, maybe a better way to step through it, that the event is approved and then they get their liquor license, not that they have to provide the liquor license for their event. That's my thought on that.
Gotcha.
I haven't been on the board long enough, and I don't know if there's somebody that can relate what happened. Jeff, you might be able to help out with the old Cary days. It was my understanding they were forced to pay for services, and that led to the ending of Cary days, but I don't know if that's true or not.
I was going to say,
That's
that's a little
okay.
bit more before my
Jesus.
time, but Dave Chapman would have been the one probably to talk to about that. But I think you're right in terms of that we were going to then turn around and request
Right.
repayment back, and that's kind of what shut them down then.
Yeah. I guess I just echo what Trustee Cavelli is saying. I'd like everybody to be treated on a level playing field. And it seems like, the half marathon, which is a great event. I think it's the 40th anniversary this year, and a very successful program. And for them to be paying all these years, it seems a little bit unfair. So that's all I have.
Any other feedback?
I like the idea of having some type of application, because I think it's important for us to have to monitor what's going on. My question is, are we looking, if someone's applying, then are we going to approve every single event? I mean, is the board then going to a policy that says every single event that's going on has to come before the board for approval? Or is it more so that we have something on file, or what's the purpose of it? Is, I guess, I like the idea of it, but I'm trying to take it to that next level.
Yeah, it's not to make it a more cumbersome process. I mean, right now, we bring it before the village board. Road closures, that comes to mind when it comes before the village board for approval. Not trying to make this a more bureaucratic process. Just want to make it a streamlined process so that applicants understand what's expected of them here, and it's easy for village staff to go through and make sure all the documents are submitted.
Sure. I mean, and again, I think we need to look at all these types of things and do try and keep everyone in a fair playing field. I do have some concerns with something happening where an event can no longer occur if it winds up being too costly. That's my only concern with some of it. If that's what truly occurred with Cary Days, that's a little concerning. I want to make sure that we don't do something where something can't occur, see where we're at with that. But I think that if someone knows up front and it's built into whatever they're doing, that's fine. I didn't see National Night Out on here, though. Did I miss that?
Yeah, we did include village-sponsored events.
Okay.
That would be considered a village-sponsored event. Obviously, we're not going to bill back ourselves here. It's specifically organizations that we would be billing back is what we included on this list.
Okay. So what about, so for a block party, are they going to then be required, or someone's going to have a block party in their neighborhood?
The block
Just
party,
kind of closing it out here, because I
Yeah.
read some of it to say, is this
right now, we have an application for block parties, and my understanding, that's been working pretty good here, and
Okay.
they would continue to go under that process here, so.
I think we need to check into it a little bit more too, and make sure where we're at. Obviously, finance is always a big issue, especially with what's going on in our state and what kind of monies we have coming in and expenses that we have. So it's very important and prudent for us to look at all these things. I'm curious, just from my own standpoint, what other communities that are of like size of ours, what they're doing. Just because I'd like to have an idea. I don't want someone to say, hey, I want to pull from, I don't want to do this in the Cary area anymore. I'm going to go do it in Fox River Grove because it's more economical. Or just to get an idea. I think it's important to have as much information as we can have to make a good, well-informed decision.
We could certainly gather that data.
Jeff, you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a few. I think the application is fine. I don't really have any issues with that. When I look at these events here, though, I see a lot of them as defining what our community is and what makes Cary Cary. So I don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face and not fund these events just because we see it as something that's, oh, well, we can't afford to fund that because our budget is in such a state. However, when I look at the overtime, police overtime and public works overtime, why does that have to be overtime? Why can't, for the Cary Main Street Fest, when an officer is down there working, why does that have to be counted as overtime? Couldn't they just be down there on their shift, and then if something happens?
Yeah, I understand that question, and the answer to that question is twofold. Number one is calls don't stop coming in. So if there's something that happens, then you'd have to vacate that assignment at whatever special event this was to go handle that call, especially if it's not preemptible. Domestic violence, accident injuries, things of that nature. The second thing is we don't have a lot of people that we could staff the road and staff special events. We just don't have that number of personnel to do that, especially if it's a well-attended special event.
I understand that, but we're talking Cary, so, okay. And then when I see these other events too that are being sponsored, it looks like the event sponsors the Park District, then I do start having an issue with us then having to cover the full cost of that event, considering the Park District's boundaries, their taxing body is quite a bit bigger than what we collect and what we're providing in terms of what we're trying to provide this service, this event, and then they're putting on the event, so they get to claim credit for the event, but then we're the ones that are really footing the bill, so to speak. So I think if something, this summer celebration, the 4th of July fireworks, Cary Park District is sponsoring that, I think then we ought to take a moment and step back and say, okay, well then what can you contribute to help out the village of Cary in terms of that funding? The summer concert series, I think it's a great thing, but again, it's the Park District that's putting that on.
Yeah, we don't
But there's no,
assign,
I see,
yeah, there's no
that 0,
cost
0,
for
so
that.
there's nothing there.
Right.
So I think I want to continue to fund these events, so that's where I stand.
I will say too, related to some of your comments, Trustee Kraus, both Chief Finland and Director Morimoto work pretty diligently here to control overtime. I understand where you're coming from, but we're always looking at different ways to staff events. We're concerned here and want to make sure everyone is, safe at these events. But, a good example here was this year, I think, with the Fall Fest and our Main Street Fest, we utilized a private contractor to provide some services instead of, our police force here as just an alternative option to see how it would work. So we're always looking at different ways to do things to try to control costs for the community.
And we do use some of our salaried personnel. I'll be at the Main Street Fest, and the deputy chiefs will be at the state Main Street Fest to augment that amount of personnel that are assigned there. And we've cut back on our personnel. The first year, we didn't know what to expect, so we did staff it relatively heavy. And this last year, we did scale back our staffing on that because of our previous experience with that event.
The same is true. I mean, like I said, the concern becomes things like, and I don't know the answer to some of these, so we need to find out, but I don't want to see the Cary Youth Baseball Parade not be able to go on because they're saying, hey, we don't charge people to be in the baseball parade, but yet there's costs incurred with it. I mean, some of it is the cost of doing business, is the way I look at some of it. So I want to be cognizant of the fact that not every one of these events are going to have the pocketbook to cover all of these types of things.
And maybe if I could introduce a philosophy here in terms of a civic organization versus another governmental body versus a private organization. Hill Striders fall into the private organization. They're not affiliated with any civic organization, and it's a very successful event, and they do generate revenues related to that event. But your example of the Cary Youth Baseball is, it's a tradition. It's been going on for decades. And I don't know that you want to be the, board that stops that. So I agree with you in regards to that. And then you have your other governmental bodies, the Park District for sure, and who knows, something could evolve with the Fire Protection District where they might need assistance related to traffic control or crowd control or something like that, and maybe we want to look at it on those three levels. It's just something to consider.
We can always, too, if the board decides to charge for some of these events or charge back for overtime, you can always, like we have in here right now, you can always tier it. It doesn't have to be that full freight amount, that full overtime amount for different organizations and different groups. I heard it mentioned once here, having a fair process. And this is a long time coming to talk about this here because we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and the village board understands who's getting charged what when we're charging them.
Right.
And then there's an obscure state statute, and I'm certain that our attorney would appreciate it, but it's called the Parade Police Protection Charge Waiver Act. And if it's a federal holiday and it's presented by a congressional or state chartered veterans organization, you can waive those charges.
So like the Memorial Day Parade.
The Memorial Day Parade is an event that is put on by either the American Legion or the AMVETS. It's chartered federally by a congressional act, so that would fall into the ability for you to waive those charges.
Because I would never want to charge for the Memorial Day Parade. I don't want to charge our vets to have a parade.
So there are things like that too that you can consider as well.
Well,
We can
and-
stipulate that, right? Because you're saying.
It's a state statute.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah. That's good to know.
Mhm.
So the other thing I would say is that, it's also getting the information out to organizations if we get to that, if and when we keep on discussing or wherever we come up with this, would be going back to them and seeing is there a way that, let's just take the biggest hit here, which is, well, for Public Works, it's the Mary Carey Parade. So then it's a question of, is there a way to decrease some of that costs that's going to be passed on? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Because it's a lot of hours.
To decrease, say, the public works or police overtime costs. Right now, I mean, we try to staff this as,
Sure, as lean as possible.
as bare bones as possible here. I mean, it's something that we always look at every year to see if we can adjust our operations, but some of these events, we just have to have overtime.
Sure.
In certain events like Mary Carey Parade in particular, that is, actually there aren't very many overtime intensive events for Public Works. A lot of what we do for preparation can be done in regular time. And then the events, our partners like the police department or the explorers that will stage barricades, and then they'll actually pull them out and place them for the event. So that minimizes our need for call-outs and overtime. But events like the Mary Carey Parade in particular are a little bit different in the fact that the scale of the amount of barricades, it's not just road closures, but pedestrian control, and then the need to erect that parade zone and then take it down right away so we don't cause traffic issues. That's a manpower, that's a function of manpower. So the only way to do that would be to not have that physical separation of all the parade participants with the road.
Sure.
So we're balancing the type of event, the need of the event with the hours.
So out of curiosity, then just going down to the next event, the Cary Grove Family Days Carnival, how come there's no Public Works overtime for that?
There's a
There's a
decent
lot.
amount of hours involved in helping the closures and the setup for that, but we're able to do that during the
Okay.
regular workday.
Perfect, that makes sense.
So a lot of these events, they do take time away from other tasks,
Sure.
but again, that's part of the support for the community events that really give Cary the flavor that it has.
That's a good point. I mean, it's important to note too that a lot of, right here, all that we're seeing is the overtime, but there's a lot of time that's expended that is during, the working hours. Again, there's time that, Director Morimoto, Chief Finland are attending these events and they're not on overtime at all. So there's other costs here that are outside of this realm. Right now, we're focusing on overtime, but we have to have that in the back of our mind as we evaluate this.
And remember, the JC Fest or the Family Fest is conducted in an area where we can block off those roadways, and there are very good ways around that in terms of detours. So when Public Works establishes those detour routes, they don't have to be taken down.
Chris, you have any comments?
I just have, I do like the application, but I definitely would like to look at other villages and other, just on how much they spend for things like that, because these events help Cary, and we don't want to hurt ourselves, because all these events are great things, even just to have Mary Carey, some people might even, just come and then they go out to the restaurants or something like that. So it helps even Cary itself. So I don't want to hurt these events because we're charging them a fee or anything like that. So to watch. And then also like baseball, they really don't make the money. They don't have the money to pay for the overtime. And that would be terrible not to have the baseball parade.
Jennifer, any comments?
I spoke over the summer with the village administrator for Fox River Grove and kind of asked him some questions about this type of stuff. One of the things I remember, I think it was the JC parade, I talked to you about it, Jake. I think, not the parade, the, whatever they put on the JC's Family Days
Family
over
Days,
there
yeah.
in Fox River
Yeah.
Grove. They keep half their proceeds, from what I recall, for the rainy day fund, and then the other half of their proceeds are donated back to the village of Fox River Grove. I don't know how they handle everything else. With regard to the finances part of it, I mean, I would like to see everybody treated as equal as much as possible. I'm curious, since Kim works for a municipality, how they do it where she works, and maybe she can answer that.
We have an hourly rate. It's billed higher than what the highest salary would be. We include vehicle costs, insurance costs. We treat everyone the same. So anytime I get a request for something like that, I tell them what our cost is and we charge them.
And does that go for anybody, like, there's no differentiation, like Cary Youth Baseball would be charged the same as the Hill Striders?
Yeah, we would do the same for everyone. So we do the schools, businesses, anyone that asks us outside of overtime that we have to pay for, it's called a contract detail. We do charge for that. And to mention the baseball thing, so I recently just signed my son up for Cary Grove Youth Baseball. And as a parent, I mean, if they asked a parent to pay to help support that parade, I would. So I think you'll get community support because they do like these events. I've been involved in the parade. It's a great parade. I want to see the parade continue. I think that we can get creative with some of this stuff and still keep some of this stuff.
Well, I think all these, I'm sorry, Jim, you had some other comment?
Yeah, it's just sort of pulling back from what I was going to say, but it seems like a lot of the board wants to keep it as far as not charging. And I would just like to see everybody treated the same way. And, on that note, with the Hill Striders half marathon, they have said that they limit that to 1,000 runners due to the fact that we charge them for their services. And I had this discussion with Chris Clark before you, Jake. And I think that event could easily be triple, quadruple the size, but they don't want to go there due to this, which is concerning. And, if we're going to go that route and everybody is not charged, then I would like to see them treated the same way. That's all.
Well, again, I think all these events that are listed here and some others that are listed under too, that defines what Cary is. I mean, I've been in this community for 25 years and we've participated in almost every one of these in some way, shape, or form. But, I'd asked Jake earlier to come up with an accounting. I think that we spent last year about $40,000 in additional monies to put these events down. When you look at the amount of people.
For the overtime.
Yeah, for the amount of people that it brings into the community and the entertainment it provides and the community spirit and, promoting our community every way that we can, I think that's a wonderful return on our investment. And all of these events keep getting bigger because we've got people that are buying into these things. And I believe that we all know one of the very first things that we do as board members is when we look at something, it's public safety. And we have an obligation to perform our duties to make sure that our community is safe, not only for our residents and businesses, for people that are visiting our community, and always show off that our best foot forward and show that we've got things under control. So I think that I would like to see, these continue to be funded in the way that they have, but I agree with Jim about, maybe looking at some of these other things, but I had talked to Scott, who's the director of the Hill Striders Board, and he's always said they don't want to get any bigger because it's just too much. It's too much for them. That's why they cut it off at 1,000 people. I've been the starter of that for the last 5 years, and every month he goes, this is just getting too big. This is why they cut it off. So, for that, if they want to grow it and they want to do that, I don't have a problem because I know that they limit their enrollment to 1,000 people or whatever it is, and they just stop accepting it. So I don't think having another couple hundred people is going to do anything to our outside services here. But I agree. I'd like to, there's been some great comments here. I'd like to see what other communities are doing and with regards to some of these events. But looking at all these events, I don't know if there's any other communities that do the amount of events that we do to promote our community the way they do. So I will look forward to the continued discussion with regards to this and get the information that some of the trustees have required.
Is there any other research that Village Board would want us to do? We'll certainly look at what some other communities in the area and our size are doing, but anything else?
I would just like to know why there are the two that reimburse us. Were they asked to? Did they volunteer to reimburse us? Or why is the Hill Striders Running Club reimbursing us for the services that we're providing, and then nobody else? Why?
Yeah, Hill Striders, I think that's just been a long-standing that they've reimbursed the Village of Cary here. The playoff football games, I couldn't answer that question. I don't know if the chief can't, so.
And that, I don't have a problem with that with the District 155, I think.
They're loaded.
Yeah. So.
We're going to charge them double. Just kidding.
That would be my only additional comment.
I could find that out.
I like the way that Pat said they'll break it down by different entities. I think that's a great way to separate things too. Because, I also do look at that and I say, yes, the football game's great, but I also look at the homecoming parade and I think almost 23 hours in overtime for them to host a homecoming parade. That's a little harsh. I don't know what homecoming generates, so to speak, whether that's something, I just am concerned. I don't want to be in a position, as Trustee Kraus said, where we cut off our nose to spite our face. Because I want to keep the community, the flavor of the community and the different things that we offer. I think that is the charm, one of the charming things about this village that we have these type of things for our residents. But I definitely want to find out more research so we can make a good decision.
My comments on the application are that I think that it's good to know, but I certainly don't want to see these applications come before us every single time.
Right.
I think that these are, they're well-tested things, but I think it's a good idea to have something on file, so we have all the contact information in that. And this gives, a good sampling of what each event will do, and I think that will be just good to have. So well done on the research on this application, so thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.